Look at that, guys. It's the human gravy boat. Bryce Sinclair, the host's son, grinned, flashing a dangerously charming smile at his friends, Madison and Ethan. They were standing near the massive French doors of the Sinclair Estate ballroom, observing the party. But their eyes were fixed on the corner near the buffet. There, adjusting a tray of appetizers, stood Chloe, the 16-year-old daughter of the family housekeeper, Mrs. Lena Williams. She was wearing a borrowed, navy blue dress that was slightly too tight. "I bet she's never danced." "Not once," Bryce whispered, his voice dripping with mock sincerity. "Look at that dress. It's practically daring someone to ask. It's a charity event, right? We should do something for the less fortunate." Ethan snickered. "She'd probably break the floor." Mrs. Williams, overhearing the cruel joke, tightened her grip on a clean water glass. Her eyes begged her daughter, "Ignore them. Finish your job." Bryce walked directly toward Chloe, his motion causing a few nearby party guests to turn their heads. He stopped right in front of her, his arrogance filling the space. "Hello, gravy boat, Chloe," Bryce said, leaning in. "Feeling left out of the party?" He snatched a glass of cider from her tray and set it aside, making her hands suddenly lighter and more exposed. Then, with a dramatic, exaggerated bow designed entirely to draw attention, he extended his hand. "Come dance with me." The proposal, delivered in front of a growing, curious crowd, instantly shut down all conversation in their immediate vicinity. This was not a friendly invitation, it was a calculated humiliation. "It's just one song, Chloe. You can lead," Ethan called out, his voice loud enough to carry. "It'll be hilarious." Chloe felt a burning shame, but her mother's terrified gaze, the fear of losing her 20-year job, ignited something sharper than tears. She thought of all the times she was invisible, all the whispers, all the judgment. "Fine," Chloe said, her voice quiet but steady. She placed the tray down on a side table. Bryce's grin widened into a triumphant sneer. He had won. He took her hand, pulling her toward the center of the dance floor where the orchestra was playing a smooth, elegant waltz. He whispered in her ear, "Don't trip now. The Sinclairs hate scratches on the marble." But the moment Chloe reached the edge of the polished floor, her whole posture transformed. The awkwardness vanished. Her chin lifted, and as Bryce placed his hand on her waist, she placed her hand on his shoulder, not with the timid touch of a maid's daughter, but with the firm, authoritative grip of someone who was suddenly, and terrifyingly, in control. Bryce started to lead, expecting her to be clumsy. But as he began his first box step, he felt an instant, subtle resistance. Chloe shifted her weight, and with a movement that was too fluid, too precise for a novice, she took the lead. Her first step was not heavy. It was a confident, effortless glide. She didn't follow the music, she moved like the music. Bryce stumbled slightly, his expensive shoe catching momentarily on the marble. He looked down at his feet, then back up at Chloe in confusion. His arrogant smirk was gone. "Did you see that?" Madison whispered, her face tight. "She's actually good." Chloe guided Bryce through a quick, smooth reverse turn that forced him to adjust his pace instantly. He was sweating, his face tight with furious confusion. He, the host's son, was following the maid's daughter. "You're tense, Bryce," Chloe murmured, her voice even, almost therapeutic, completely shattering his rhythm. "Relax your shoulders. You're supposed to be following my lead, not fighting it." The quiet authority in her tone, the sheer mastery in her movement, was a silent, public humiliation. He was supposed to be showing her up, but he felt clumsy, heavy-footed, and worst of all, defeated after the first few steps. Bryce pulled back abruptly, breaking the sequence. The movement was clumsy, drawing stares. "Enough," Bryce snapped, his voice loud, choked with panic. "The joke's over." Chloe stood motionless, her breathing perfectly even, contrasting sharply with his heavy panting. She looked him dead in the eye, and her response was delivered with the cold precision of a weapon. "Joke?" she asked, raising a delicate eyebrow. "I thought you said it was a demonstration for charity. Did you already donate your pride?" The silence that followed was absolute. The real lesson had just begun. The silence was shattered not by applause, but by a cold, cutting voice that sliced through the orchestra's melody. "What is going on here?" Mrs. Sinclair, the lady of the house, glided into the space. She was a woman of icy elegance, and her eyes, sharp and unforgiving, instantly fixed on Chloe. "Bryce, why is she on the floor and not by the serving station? This is highly inappropriate." Bryce, seizing the moment to deflect his shame, immediately pointed at Chloe. "Mom, she cornered me." She was drawing attention to herself and being inappropriate to the guests. I was just trying to get her to leave the dance floor gracefully. The lie was smooth, reflexive, and utterly convincing to those who wanted to believe it. Mrs. Sinclair didn't look at Bryce. She stared straight at Chloe. Is that true, Chloe? Chloe could have denied it. She could have saved her mother's 20-year career with a simple, quiet, "No, ma'am, I apologize." But the memory of being called the human gravy boat was too fresh, too painful. She looked Mrs. Sinclair in the eye. "No, Mrs. Sinclair," Chloe replied, standing taller. "Your son invited me as a joke. I accepted because I believe that in this house, dignity is the only thing that isn't bought, and I needed to show him I have some." A collective gasp went through the few onlookers nearby. Lena Williams, Chloe's mother, felt the blood drain from her face. She knew that word, dignity, was a death sentence in the Sinclair's world. Mrs. Sinclair's mouth thinned into a razor line. "Lena," she called, her voice dangerously low, "your daughter has just insulted my son and disrespected my guests. She is no longer welcome on this property. And as for you, I'll see you in my office tomorrow morning." The threat was clear. Lena was fired. Chloe had won the dance, but lost her mother's livelihood. Bryce's arrogant sneer returned, victorious. "See you in the gutter, gravy boat," he murmured as Chloe turned, her shoulders slumping with the weight of her mistake. But just as Chloe reached the door, a figure with a severe, aristocratic face stepped forward and blocked her path. This was Mr. Alastair Finch, a renowned Broadway choreographer and the evening's guest of honor, whose foundation provided the gala's largest donation. "Wait," Mr. Finch's voice boomed, cutting through the tense atmosphere. "Mrs. Sinclair, I just witnessed that entire sequence. That young woman, who is she?" Mrs. Sinclair looked visibly annoyed. "She is nothing, Alastair. The housekeeper's problem. Please, let's not make a scene." Mr. Finch ignored her, walking directly toward Chloe, his eyes shining with a strange, intense professional focus. He looked at her not as a servant's child, but as an object of profound interest. "That footwork," Mr. Finch said, grabbing Chloe's chin and turning her face to the light. "The placement, the centering, the impossible control. That's not just talent. That's disciplined technique." He looked at the shocked crowd, then back at Chloe. "Tell me your name, girl. And tell me where you trained." Chloe felt the lump in her throat. The entire ballroom, including her terrified mother and the furious Sinclairs, waited for the answer. She just managed to say, "Nowhere, sir," before her voice failed. Mr. Finch frowned. "Nonsense. That's impossible. You move like a professional. You have the posture of a champion." He shook his head slowly. "You have a secret, girl. And if you don't tell me what it is right now, I'll assume you stole that talent too. I am offering you a scholarship right here, right now. Don't waste my time." Chloe knew she had to speak the truth, but the Sinclair's anger and the choreographer's intensity locked her voice in her throat. She looked at her mother, who was silently weeping. The money from that scholarship could save their lives, but the Sinclairs would never let her tell the truth. Mr. Alastair Finch's intense gaze and his offer of a scholarship hung in the air, trapping Chloe in the spotlight. Her mother, Lena, looked terrified, clutching her apron, her eyes begging Chloe to say nothing, to choose silence over truth. "Speak, girl. Don't waste my time," Mr. Finch demanded. "That control comes from somewhere. Where did you train?" Chloe knew she couldn't tell him about the truth of her training. The Sinclairs would use it against her mother, but she couldn't afford to lose the scholarship either. "Sir," Chloe said, her voice barely a whisper, "I move the way I need to move to carry my mother's burden. That's all." It was a brilliant half-truth. Mr. Finch frowned, clearly unsatisfied. Before he could press further, Mrs. Sinclair stepped in, placing a possessive hand on the choreographer's arm. "Alastair, this is ridiculous. It's a child of the staff who is clearly trying to extort attention. I believe she's lying. She needs to leave now before she completely ruins the evening." Mr. Finch hesitated, but Mrs. Sinclair's influence was undeniable. He finally backed down, giving Chloe a hard, searching look. "Find me, girl. If you were telling the truth, find me." Chloe didn't wait. She grabbed her mother's hand and pulled her towards the back exit. They needed to escape the spotlight before the Sinclairs did any more damage. Bryce, his smirk fully restored, watched them go. "That's what you get for talking back," he muttered. The next morning, the humiliation and fear were palpable in the Williams' small apartment. Lena had been called to the office, a dreaded term that meant the main house's study. "I'm going to lose my job, Chloe," Lena whispered, tears filling her eyes as she pressed a worn, laminated card into Chloe's hand. 20 years. All because you let your pride get in the way." The card was a faded photograph of a young, powerful-looking black man, and the only word written beneath it was rhythm. "This is not pride, Mama. It's survival," Chloe insisted, her voice tight. "And I did not do this for pride. I did this for him." She tapped the laminated card. Chloe's father, Julian Rhythm Williams, had been a legendary, self-taught street dancer from Harlem. He wasn't a ballerina or a waltz expert, but an artist whose raw, powerful movements had captivated New York, until he was framed for a crime he didn't commit and sentenced to life. Chloe wasn't just working at the Sinclair's house to help her mother. She had a secret mission. She had been trying to get her hands on Mrs. Sinclair's personal files for months. Why? Because Mr. Sinclair's law firm had been heavily involved in prosecuting the case against her father 2 decades ago. Chloe's sudden, public display of doubts wasn't just about dignity. It was a calculated risk to draw the attention of Mr. Finch, who was famous for his connections to powerful, justice-focused foundations. It was her only hope of finding a lawyer who could reopen her father's case. Later that morning, Chloe sat alone in the apartment, knowing her mother was facing the Sinclair's wrath. Suddenly, her phone pinged with an anonymous message. It was a picture of the Sinclair's private filing cabinet, with a circled date. Julian Williams case files, destroyed January 1st. Chloe felt a shock of cold dread. She was too late. Her father's last hope was gone. Just then, her phone rang. It was Bryce Sinclair. "Didn't think you'd hear from me, did you, Gravy Boat?" Bryce's voice was smug. "Mom fired your mother. Right now. You know why? Because of your little charity stunt." Chloe closed her eyes, fighting back a wave of panic. "What do you want, Bryce?" "I want the truth about that dance," he snarled. "And I want you to apologize to my mother publicly. Otherwise, I'll personally make sure no one in this county ever hires your mother again. And I'll leak a little secret about your father, Julian Williams, the convicted felon." "You don't know anything about my father," Chloe whispered, her hands shaking with suppressed fury. "Oh, I know everything. And I know exactly how you learned to move like that. And I can use it to destroy what little pride you have left." Bryce paused for dramatic effect. "Meet me at the community center tonight at 8. Alone. Or your mother starves." The humiliation was no longer about a dance. It was about survival. Chloe knew she had to face him, but she also knew she couldn't tell him her secret. Not yet. She had to figure out what he knew about rhythm, and why he was so desperate to cover up the dance. The neon sign of the community center flickered lazily. It was 10 minutes past 8, and Chloe stood alone in the empty parking lot, clutching the worn, laminated photo of her father, Julian Rhythm Williams. The air was cold, but the icy knot of fear and fury in her stomach was colder. A black Mercedes SUV, instantly recognizable as belonging to the Sinclair family, pulled up. The passenger door opened, and Bryce stepped out, a smug, victorious look plastered on his face. He held a small, black phone in his hand, tapping its screen nervously. "You actually showed up," Bryce sneered, walking towards her. "Good. You're smarter than I thought, Gravy Boat. My mother is fired, Bryce." "You win," Chloe said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her legs. "Now, what is it you want? And what do you know about my father?" Bryce laughed, a harsh, joyless sound. "I want your mother to call my mother and beg for the job back. And I want you to publicly post a video saying you lied about the dance, that you staged it to get attention." He paused, letting the demand sink in. "As for your father, I know everything." Bryce held up the phone. The screen showed a faded, grainy photograph of a young, extraordinarily fit black man mid-air, executing a complex, gravity-defying breakdance move. "This is Julian Williams, isn't it?" Bryce taunted. "Your dad. Not just some criminal. He was Rhythm, the legend. He could move like water. And guess what? I found the police report from 20 years ago. It says he was arrested after a brutal assault in a club." Chloe felt a surge of cold horror. The Sinclairs had the police report. "The real question, Chloe," Bryce continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "is how you move like that. That posture, that control. That was not a clumsy maid's daughter. That was the same footwork as your convict father." He took a menacing step closer. "You're trying to clear a criminal's name, aren't you? You think you can dance your way into the Sinclair law files." Chloe knew she had to take the offensive. "The file your father's firm destroyed this morning," she shot back. "I know about that, Bryce. You tried to erase the evidence." Bryce froze, his smirk collapsing. "How do you?" "I had help," Chloe lied, bluffing to gain control. "You're protecting a lie. My father was framed. And your pathetic attempts to humiliate me were just a desperate cover-up, because you knew I was close to finding the truth in your files." Bryce's face was a mask of panic. He pulled the phone away quickly. You don't know what you're talking about. The files were destroyed on schedule. My dad handled the case. He's the best. Is he? Chloe challenged, focusing on the one thing she knew was true, his ego. Then why were you so clumsy during the waltz, Bryce? I barely touched you, and you lost control. You are used to winning by cheating, but you can't cheat rhythm. You can't cheat discipline. Bryce's eyes narrowed, a different kind of shame flashing across his face. I can dance better than you freak. You think that stupid street trash move is the only way to move? I train at the academy. Oh, you train? Chloe raised an eyebrow. Then you know that true control is silence, not show. You think that waltz was my secret? It was just a test. She suddenly took a step back, her stance shifting, not into the waltz, but into a low, powerful, serpentine stance. It was a move Julian rhythm Williams was famous for, a grounded, effortless freeze position, held perfectly still. My training wasn't in a studio, Bryce, Chloe said, her voice dropping, filled with the raw power of the street. It was watching my father's old tapes in secret. I don't dance in circles. I dance to break patterns. And you are the pattern I'm breaking tonight. Bryce was visibly intimidated. He dropped his phone slightly, staring at her low, centered posture. You want the truth about the dance? Chloe continued, moving with a sudden, sharp fluidity. I was only using 10% of my skill. The waltz was a distraction. She executed 2 swift, powerful up-rocking steps, her feet tapping the concrete with the precision of a drumbeat, then spun into a controlled power move that ended with her hand lightly resting on the hood of the Mercedes. It was a display of aggressive, undeniable talent. I didn't dance with you to get a scholarship, Chloe revealed. I danced with you to get Finch's attention, yes, but mostly, I danced to expose your greatest weakness. Bryce was cornered, his panic making him lash out. You're a criminal's daughter. You're still fired. Your mother is blacklisted. Maybe, Chloe conceded, walking slowly back to him. But I have your secret now, Bryce. I know why you were so scared of my footwork. You and your father are covering something up, and I won't stop until I find the missing file. As Chloe turned to walk away, having taken back control of the situation, Bryce screamed one last desperate threat after her. Wait, there's one thing you don't know. Your mother knows about your father's file. She knows the real reason your father was framed. And she's been keeping it secret from you for 20 years. Chloe stopped, the truth hitting her harder than any punch. Her mother, the one person she trusted, had been lying to her all along. The sound of Bryce's screeching tires faded as he sped away, but his last revelation. Your mother knows the real reason your father was framed. Hung in the cold air, heavier than any threat. Chloe stood rooted to the spot, the betrayal sharp and immediate. Her fight for her father was built on trust, and that foundation had just shattered. She rushed back to their small apartment, finding her mother, Lena, packing a cardboard box. Lena's eyes were red, but dry. He told me, Chloe whispered, her voice tight with pain. Bryce said you know why Dad was framed. Why, Mama? Why did you keep the truth about Julian from me for 20 years? Lena stopped packing and slowly sank onto the sofa, the weight of the secret finally crushing her. It wasn't Bryce who told me, Lena said, her voice shaking. It was Mrs. Sinclair. 20 years ago, right after the trial, she offered me the housekeeper job, a stable life for you, on one condition. That I never tell you the truth, and that I never let you dance. But what is the truth? Chloe demanded, sinking to her knees in front of her mother. Lena swallowed hard. Julian, he wasn't framed by the police. He was set up by Mr. Sinclair's law partner, because Julian refused to sell his Harlem Community Center, the rhythm spot. They needed the land for a Sinclair development project. Chloe gasped. The rhythm spot? The place he wrote about in his letters. Yes, Lena choked out. The framed-up police report, the one Bryce's father destroyed, was written by Mr. Sinclair himself, to protect his partner. And when Julian was arrested, he made me promise, don't fight. Don't let Chloe dance. Just survive. He knew if you danced, if you showed your talent, the Sinclairs would realize you were his daughter, and they would ruin us both. Chloe understood everything now. Her mother's desperation, the fear, the warning against pride. Lena hadn't protected a criminal. She had protected a martyr's dying wish. But I danced anyway, Mama, Chloe whispered. I risked everything. And you were right to, a quiet voice said from the doorway. Mr. Alastair Finch stood there, his severe face softened by an unexpected look of deep respect. I found your mother outside the Sinclair gate crying, Mr. Finch explained. I had my people run a name, Julian Williams. He pulled out his phone. I didn't steal his talent, girl. I knew him. I saw Julian dance once, 20 years ago. The raw brilliance, it was unforgettable. And then he vanished. Mr. Finch held the phone out. The screen showed an article. The Sinclair law firm under investigation for land fraud and case tampering. When Mrs. Sinclair had your mother fired, she tried to cover the tracks, Mr. Finch said. But your waltz, Chloe, it was so perfect, so disciplined. It confirmed my suspicion that you were his daughter. You didn't just expose Bryce's arrogance. You exposed the Sinclair law firm's weakness, that they are willing to crush anyone who stands in the way of their power. My foundation exists to fund artists and fight injustice, Mr. Finch concluded, his eyes fixed on Chloe. The scholarship is still yours. But I'm offering you something more valuable, my legal team. They will use this new investigation to reopen Julian's case. We're fighting to clear his name and to get the rhythm spot back. 3 months later, the Sinclair law firm faced a massive public scandal. Mr. Sinclair's career was over, thanks to the evidence of fraud exposed by Mr. Finch's legal team. As for Chloe, she was no longer the maid's daughter. She was the protégée of Mr. Alastair Finch. She stood on a small stage in the reopened Rhythm Spot Community Centre, teaching a group of young, aspiring dancers. Lena sat in the front row, no longer ashamed, but bursting with pride. A reporter approached Chloe after the class. How does it feel, Chloe, to have risked everything? Your mother's job, your future, just to dance? Chloe smiled, adjusting the lightweight brace on her wrist, a small reminder of the physical cost of her rigorous, secret training. My father taught me that true power is not about controlling the floor, Chloe replied, her voice strong and clear. It's about knowing your rhythm and using it to break the pattern of injustice. They asked me to dance as a joke, but I accepted it as a revolution. In a world where the powerful often believe they can silence the weak, Chloe proved that sometimes the greatest force against corruption isn't wealth or status, but the sheer, undeniable dignity of a single, perfectly executed dance step.